What if the biggest thing keeping you from being free isn't some outside force, but a hidden part of your own mind you refuse to look at? What if those invisible walls boxing you in, those self-sabotaging habits that play on a loop, and that feeling that you're just a passenger in your own life? What if it all comes from a single, unacknowledged source inside you? We spend our lives looking for freedom out in the world, a new job, a new city, a new relationship, thinking that if we can just change our circumstances, we'll finally break free. But the most profound explorers of the human psyche, especially Carl Jung, had a much more startling idea. The heaviest chains are the ones we forge ourselves in the darkness of our own unconscious. And you will never be truly free until you turn around and face the very part of yourself you've spent your whole life running from. This journey isn't for the faint of heart. It's a descent into your own depths, a face-to-face meeting with what Jung called the shadow. And it's the only real path to self-awareness and authentic freedom. Before we go deeper, a quick thank you. Every like, comment, or subscribe means more than you think. It's what keeps this channel alive, and it's how we grow together. So if you find value here, let's make this journey ours. There's a feeling, a deeply human and unsettling feeling that runs through modern life. It's the sense of being stuck. It's that quiet frustration of watching the same destructive patterns play out over and over, like you're an actor reading from a script you never wrote. Ever find yourself in a relationship that's a spooky echo of the last one, even after you swore you'd learned your lesson? Ever get to the brink of a huge success, only to make some foolish, out-of-character mistake that snatches defeat from the jaws of victory? Do you ever feel like you're at war with yourself? Like one part of you wants to grow, to connect, to succeed, while another, unseen part seems hell-bent on your failure? This is the quiet desperation many of us live with, a feeling of being controlled by forces we can't see. You might chalk it up to bad luck, or a character flaw. In your most honest moments, you might even call it self-sabotage. But what if it's something more fundamental? What if it's a psychological principle, one that's just as real as gravity? This feeling of being torn in two isn't a personal failing. It's a symptom of a deep split in the psyche, a gap between the person we think we are and the vast, unknown continent inside us. We live in an age that worships the conscious mind. We value logic, reason, and control. We build our identities, our public personas, like carefully constructed fortresses. We show the world an acceptable, competent, and good version of ourselves. We're the friendly colleague, the loving partner, the rational citizen. We think this mask, this persona, is all we are. And yet, you're haunted. Haunted by moods that appear from nowhere, anxieties we can't name, and compulsions that defy all our logic. We find ourselves snapping at a loved one, overcome by a sudden wave of sadness, or paralyzed by a fear our conscious mind knows is irrational. This is what it feels like to be controlled by the unconscious. It's the feeling of being a puppet, your strings pulled by a hidden master. We can feel the tugs, we see the results in our lives, but we can't see the hand pulling the strings. We try to fight back, we use willpower, we make New Year's resolutions. We swear that this time, it'll be different. But our willpower, a product of the conscious mind, is like a tiny lifeboat in the massive ocean of the unconscious. And when the tides of that ocean rise, our best-laid plans are washed away. This is why you feel trapped. You're trying to win a battle against an enemy you can't see, with weapons it doesn't even recognize. You're fighting a shadow war. The psychiatrist Carl Jung would argue this is the central problem of human life. He gave us a map to this inner world and a name for this unseen puppet master, the shadow. And he offered a chilling warning: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. When it comes to the landscape of the human mind, few people have ventured deeper or brought back such profound insights as Carl Gustav Jung. To get a handle on the shadow, we first have to understand the man who dragged it into the light. Jung wasn't just a psychiatrist, he was an archaeologist of the soul, an explorer who dared to map the vast, often dangerous territories of the unconscious that most of us spend our lives trying to avoid. Born in Switzerland in 1875, Jung started out as a protégé of Sigmund Freud. Together, they drew the first maps of the unconscious. But where Freud saw the unconscious mainly as a cellar for repressed sexual desires and primal urges, Jung saw something more. He saw a world rich with symbols, myth, and a deep underlying intelligence. Their famous breakup wasn't just a personal spat. It was a fundamental disagreement about what the human soul is. Jung believed the psyche wasn't just a product of our personal history, but was also plugged into a massive, shared inheritance of human experience, what he called the collective unconscious. For Jung, the goal of life wasn't just to manage our issues, but to embark on a journey of what he called individuation, the process of becoming a whole, complete person. And he insisted this journey was impossible without a direct, courageous confrontation with the darkest, most hidden part of ourselves. And Jung's credibility here doesn't just come from his work with patients, it comes from his own harrowing, transformative plunge into his own depths. After his break with Freud, Jung went through a period of intense inner chaos, a journey he documented in his private journal, later published as The Red Book. This wasn't just theory for him. He had conversations with figures from his dreams. He confronted his deepest fears. He let himself be guided by the strange images erupting from his own mind. He did this because he believed the meeting with oneself is, at first, the meeting with one's own shadow. He knew he couldn't guide others through a land he hadn't been willing to explore himself. He came out of that period not broken, but remade, with a revolutionary new understanding of the psyche. He had faced his own shadow, and in doing so, found the key to a more authentic life. He gave us a map, and at the center of that map is the dark continent of the shadow. It's here, in this uncomfortable and feared place, that the journey to real freedom has to begin. So, what exactly is this shadow that Jung thought holds the key to our freedom? Put simply, the shadow is everything we are, but have decided we don't want to be. It's the blind spot in our own self-image. It's the storage locker for all the parts of ourselves we've denied and pushed away. Imagine as a kid, you're taught that anger is bad. To be a good, lovable child, you have to be calm. So every time that natural spark of anger flares up, you learn to push it down, hide it, pretend it isn't there. You get so good at this that by the time you're an adult, you genuinely believe, I'm not an angry person. But that anger didn't just vanish. It was exiled to the shadow. It became a part of your unconscious, where it lives and breathes and waits. This happens with countless parts of our personality. The shadow is formed by the constant friction between our raw, instinctual selves and the demands of the world, our parents, teachers, culture, and our own ideas of who we should be. Every society and every family has rules about what's acceptable. To fit in, we conform, and every time we conform, we have to cut off a little piece of ourselves and toss it into the dark. The parts we think are too aggressive, too weak, too sexual, too emotional, too selfish, too lazy, all of it gets shoved into this invisible backpack we all carry. Jung called it the shadow because it follows us everywhere. We can't see it directly, but it's always attached to us, an inseparable part of who we are. Now, it's crucial to get this. Having a shadow isn't a moral failing. According to Jung, it's a necessary part of being human. The problem isn't that it exists. The problem is that we pretend it doesn't. We spend our lives acting like this bag of rejected selves isn't there, but it just gets heavier and heavier, pulling our strings in ways we can't comprehend. It's tempting to think of the shadow as purely negative, a dumpster for our inner demons. And it's true. The shadow holds some nasty stuff. It's home to the greed we deny, the envy we won't acknowledge, the prejudices we think we're above, and the capacity for cruelty we're certain we don't have. It's the part of us that takes a secret, shameful pleasure in other people's failures. It's the cold, calculating selfishness that hides behind a mask of generosity. To look at this side of the shadow is to face the uncomfortable truth that the line between good and evil cuts right through the center of every human heart. But that's only half the story, and this is where Jung's idea gets really interesting. The shadow isn't just a bin for our vices. It also contains our unlived life, our hidden gold. This is often called the golden shadow. Just as we push away negative traits, we also push away positive ones, either because our environment told us they were unacceptable or because they threaten the safe identity we've built for ourselves. Imagine a young boy who is sensitive and artistic, but is raised in a family that only values being tough. He might learn to bury his creativity and vulnerability, casting them into the shadow because they brought him shame. As an adult, he might become a rigid, hyper-logical businessman who scoffs at art and calls emotional expressions a weakness. His creativity hasn't vanished. It's alive and well in his shadow, just waiting. He might feel a deep emptiness in his life, a lack of color and meaning, never realizing he's the one who locked his own greatest treasures in the basement of his mind. Or think of a young girl taught that being assertive and ambitious is bossy and unladylike. She might repress her natural drive and power, pushing them into the shadow to become a people pleaser who can't set boundaries or chase her own dreams. As an adult, she might feel chronically frustrated and resentful, a victim of her circumstances, never knowing she disowned the very strength she needs to change her life. The shadow, then, is a paradox. It holds our most shameful weaknesses and our most brilliant, untapped strengths. It's both the monster and the sleeping beauty inside us. It's the source of our self-destruction and the wellspring of our true power. And as long as it stays in the dark, we can't get to the gold, and we are completely at the mercy of its demons. It pulls the strings from behind the curtain, and we, watching the tragicomedy of our own lives unfold, just call it fate. So how does this hidden part of us actually control our lives? If it's unconscious, how does it pop up in our conscious world? The main way is through a powerful and sneaky psychological process Jung called projection. Projection is when we see our own unacknowledged traits in other people. Because we can't stand to see certain qualities in ourselves, our mind unconsciously throws them onto the outside world, like a movie projector casting an image onto a blank screen. The world becomes our screen, and the people in it become actors in our private inner drama. This is a defense mechanism. It lets our ego keep up its shiny self-image. By seeing the unwanted trait out there, we get to keep the comforting belief that it's not in here. The result? We stop seeing reality clearly. We no longer see people as they are. We see them as carriers of our own repressed junk. You can almost always spot projection by a strong gut-level emotional reaction. When you have an intense, irrational, and totally out of proportion reaction to someone, love or hate, you are very likely looking at your own shadow. Ever met someone you instantly disliked for no good reason? Maybe you found them arrogant or lazy or just stupid. The sheer intensity of your annoyance is the clue. The thing that drives you nuts about them is almost certainly a disowned part of you. The person who is most loudly offended by the arrogance of others is often blind to their own pride. Their conscious persona is one of a humble, down-to-earth person, so their ego can't admit its own arrogance. It has to be projected onto someone else, where it can be safely and righteously attacked. Or consider the person who is relentlessly critical of a coworker's supposed incompetence. They point out every little mistake, gossip about their lack of skill, and just seethe with frustration. On the surface, it looks like a simple workplace problem, but that emotional heat suggests something deeper is going on. Maybe the critical person is hiding a deep secret fear of their own incompetence. By projecting this fear onto a coworker, they create a scapegoat. Condemning the coworker is really a way of reassuring themselves that they're competent, a way of keeping their own deepest insecurity locked away. Projection isn't just for negative traits. We also project our golden shadow. This is the root of hero worship and infatuation. When you fall head over heels for a mentor, a celebrity, or a new romantic partner, seeing them as impossibly brilliant and perfect, you're often just projecting your own unrealized potential onto them. You're seeing your own sleeping courage, creativity, or wisdom reflected back at you. That in-love feeling is often the feeling of being temporarily reconnected with the lost golden parts of yourself. The problem, of course, is that nobody can carry the weight of our projections for long. Eventually, they'll reveal that they're just human, and our infatuation sours into disappointment and betrayal, not because they changed, but because the movie projector broke. The consequences of living this way are devastating. On a personal level, it makes real relationships impossible. When you're projecting your shadow, you're not relating to the actual person in front of you. You're relating to a ghost from your own inner world. This is why we get stuck in fights, arguing with our partners and family, feeling totally misunderstood. We're often not even arguing with them. We're arguing with our own shadow, which we've conveniently hung on them like a coat. This leads to endless cycles of blame and resentment that kill trust and intimacy. On a deeper level, an unknown shadow leads straight to self-sabotage. Those repressed parts of us don't just lie there quietly, they demand to be expressed. And since they aren't allowed a healthy conscious outlet, they erupt in destructive ways. The buried anger leaks out as passive aggression and sarcasm. The repressed need for freedom leads to a sudden, impulsive choice to quit a good job or end a loving relationship. The repressed ambition makes you accidentally miss a deadline that would have led to a promotion. The shadow acts on its own, like a rogue agent working against your conscious goals. This is what Jung meant with his famous warning. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Your recurring bad luck probably isn't fate. It's your own shadow, working in the dark, shaping your life against your will. And on a collective level, the consequences are even more terrifying. When whole groups of people project their collective shadow, you get prejudice, racism, and war. We define an outgroup, the enemy, the foreigner, the other, and we project all of our own national fears, insecurities, and cruelties onto them. This lets us feel pure and righteous while justifying inhumanity we'd never admit to in ourselves. Jung argued that the great catastrophes of the 20th century were fueled by the unacknowledged shadow of Western civilization. When we refuse to do the inner work of facing our own darkness, that darkness gets played out on the world stage with horrific results. The path to freedom, then, isn't just a personal quest. It's a moral necessity, and it starts by taking back our projections and turning our gaze inward. If ignoring the shadow is what forges our chains, then awareness is the key that unlocks them. The path to freedom is a process Jung called integration. It's really important to understand what this means. Integration isn't about fighting the shadow. It's not about destroying it or banishing it. That's impossible. It's part of you. Fighting your shadow is just declaring war on yourself, and that's a war you can't win. Integration is the opposite. It's about turning toward the shadow. It's about bringing the rejected, denied, and feared parts of yourself into the light of awareness and learning to live with them. It's a reunion. This takes moral courage, radical honesty, and a willingness to be uncomfortable with who you really are, not who you wish you were. This is shadow work. It's not a quick fix or a simple 5-step plan. It's the difficult, profound, and lifelong job of becoming whole. So where do you even start? The first step is to become a detective in your own life. You have to look for the shadow's footprints. This means cultivating a new kind of self-awareness. Pay attention to the things you'd rather ignore. Start with your projections. Notice your strong emotional reactions. The next time you feel that intense flash of judgment or irritation at someone, stop. Don't focus on what's wrong with them. Ask a harder question. What part of myself is this person reflecting back at me? That quality that infuriates you in your boss or your partner, can you find just a 1% trace of it in yourself? This isn't about letting them off the hook. It's an honest investigation into the source of your own emotional fire. Pay attention to your slips of the tongue, the Freudian slips that reveal a hidden truth. Notice your humor, especially sarcasm, which is often a delivery system for repressed anger. And most importantly, pay attention to your dreams. For Jung, dreams are the unfiltered language of the unconscious. They are nightly letters from the shadow, showing us the parts of ourselves we're ignoring when we're awake. If you dream you're being chased by a monster, Jung would suggest the monster isn't some external threat. The monster is a part of you, a piece of your shadow that you're running from. The dream is telling you to stop running and turn around. The second step is the courageous conversation. Once you start spotting the shadow, you have to be willing to engage with it. This is a kind of internal dialogue. Instead of pushing down a shameful thought or a dark impulse, you turn toward it with curiosity. When you feel that familiar wave of envy, instead of squashing it with guilt, you can inwardly say, "Ah, envy. There you are again. What do you want? What need are you trying to tell me about?" You start treating the shadow not as an enemy to be killed, but as a neglected part of you that's trying to communicate something important. Maybe your envy of a friend's success isn't just you being petty. Maybe it's your own buried ambition, screaming for attention. By listening to the shadow with curiosity, you start to strip it of its destructive, independent power. The third step is the hardest, owning your stuff. This is where it gets real. It means consciously accepting that the darkness you see out in the world also exists in you. It means being able to say, yes, that capacity for cruelty I see in others, that's in me too. The potential for deceit, that's in me too. The weakness, the foolishness, the greed, I am capable of all of it. This is profoundly humbling. It shatters the perfect self-image our ego works so hard to protect. It's painful, but it's also liberating. Because the moment you own a trait, it no longer has unconscious power over you. By admitting, I have the capacity for great anger, you're far less likely to be possessed by a blind rage. You can see it coming, you can feel its energy, and because it's conscious, you can choose how to respond rather than just reacting. You can harness that energy for something good, like setting a firm boundary, instead of letting it explode. Finally, the fourth step is the reward for all this hard work, finding the gold. As you get to know your shadow, you start to realize it's not just a pit of darkness. Inside every negative trait, there's a seed of positive potential. Your repressed anger, once integrated, becomes passion and the courage to fight for what's right. Your repressed fear becomes foresight and healthy caution. Your repressed sadness becomes the source of empathy. And most importantly, you start to uncover the pure gold in your shadow, the creativity, the ambition, the vulnerability that you disowned years ago. Integrating the shadow isn't about becoming a darker person. It's about becoming a whole person. It's about reclaiming the lost pieces of your soul, both dark and light, and becoming the complete individual you were always meant to be. This journey of self-reflection is at the very heart of what we explore on this channel. It's a tough path, but it's the only one that leads somewhere meaningful. Thinkers like Carl Jung offer us a lantern in the dark, a guide for navigating our own complex inner worlds. If this is the kind of conversation you've been looking for, one that goes deeper than the surface, then subscribe for more explorations into the architects of the modern mind. We think these ideas are more important now than ever. And we'd be honored if you'd share your own reflections in the comments. What's one strong, irrational reaction you've had to someone recently? What might it say about your own shadow? Sharing our experiences is a powerful reminder that we're not alone in this essential human work. Let's be honest, embarking on the path of shadow work is probably the hardest thing a person can do. It asks us to give up our favorite illusions about ourselves and face the things we're most ashamed of. So, why bother? What's the ultimate payoff for this painful journey? The reward is wholeness. And from wholeness flows everything else we're chasing in life: authenticity, energy, better relationships, and real freedom. The first and most immediate reward is authenticity. When you're not hiding from parts of yourself, you stop living a fractured life. You can finally show up in the world as you actually are, not as you think you should be. The exhausting performance of keeping up a perfect persona can finally end. There's a deep sense of peace that comes from standing on the solid ground of your own complete reality, flaws and all. You become a more real and more trustworthy person, both to yourself and to others. The second reward is a huge surge of energy. Jung believed that repressing the shadow takes a massive amount of psychic energy. It's like holding a beach ball underwater 24/7. It's a constant, draining effort. When you stop fighting yourself, all of that energy is freed up for living. It's a flood of vitality you can pour into your work, your passions, and your growth. You feel less tired because you're no longer fighting an invisible civil war. Third, your relationships will transform. When you take back your projections, you start to see other people clearly for the first time. You see them as they are, in all their complexity, not just as a screen for your own issues. This allows for real intimacy and empathy. Your conflicts become less frequent and less intense because you realize that much of what used to infuriate you in others was just your own disowned self. You become more compassionate to them and to yourself because you get that everyone is struggling with their own shadow. Finally, the ultimate reward is freedom. Not the shallow freedom from outside rules, but the deep internal freedom of self-possession. When you've made your unconscious conscious, it no longer runs your life. You're no longer a puppet, helplessly reacting to the pulls of your hidden issues. You get to hold the strings. You're no longer driven by compulsions you don't understand or sabotaged by forces you can't see. You have a choice. By facing the darkness within, you are finally liberated from its power. You go from being a victim of fate to a conscious co-creator of your own destiny. You've answered the hero's call, descended into the underworld of your own psyche, and returned with the treasure, your own whole, authentic self. We started with a question. What if the greatest obstacle to your freedom isn't an external force, but a hidden part of your own mind? The wisdom of Carl Jung gives us a clear and profound answer. The obstacle is the shadow. And the freedom we're all looking for isn't found by changing the world around us, but by changing our relationship to the world within us. The path isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. It's the courageous acceptance of everything that we are, the light and the dark, the noble and the shameful, the hero and the fool. The greatest obstacle to your freedom was never an enemy out there. It was just a lost part of you, waiting in the darkness, waiting to be met, to be understood, and to finally be brought home. The journey to know your shadow is the most important journey you will ever take. It is the journey to finally and truly be free.